The winners, the losers. My message to the losers: losers, look in the mirror. No? Well, maybe you should. Sorry. Well, that's my feeling. Losers, look in the mirror, okay? You know, I mean, for months, Democrats have been saying, how is this even close? And they're right, it wasn't. They could not conceive of a second Trump term, but they should have. When does America ever turn down second? I mean, come on.
It all started on a day when everyone expected business as usual on The View. The hosts were confident, laughing, and tossing out the same takes they do every week. But then, boom, something different happened. A guest walked in who wasn't there to play nice. He wasn't there to nod along, agree, or pretend their opinions were the only ones that mattered. He came ready to challenge everything.
Well, they won. Now they have reality they have to deal with. You know, we'll see what they do. See if they live up to their word. Trump says he's going to deport 12 million people. How are you going to get 12 million people back into Mexico? And today Trump said, I'm way ahead of you. Why do you think I left so many holes in the wall?
The moment he opened his mouth, the entire mood shifted. You could feel the tension in the room. He went straight for the heart of the show's image, its reputation for having diverse perspectives, and called it out for what he believed it really was, a place where only one side gets to speak freely. No sugarcoating, no soft landing. He accused the panel of pushing a narrow, one-sided narrative and made it clear that if you don't follow their line of thinking, you're instantly labeled the enemy.
Kamala was on Saturday Night Live, as the losing candidate often is. It worked so well for Hillary. Let's run that back. And it just made me think, I'm sure every single member of the Saturday Night Live cast was a Harris supporter. But what if one of them wasn't? What if one of those cast members was for Trump? Would they have felt comfortable saying so? I really don't think so. They would have had to keep it to themselves. That's not a good place for us to be. I remember when, and that happens even more on the left. And I remember when Elon Musk hosted, and this is well before he was a Trumper. This is 3 or 4 years. He was just the richest man in the world. And a number of the cast members on Saturday Night Live, like, they didn't want to deal with him. They didn't exactly boycott, but they made it plain. And I was thinking, really? You have Elon Musk on your show for a week. You could talk to one of the most interesting, brilliant people the world has ever produced, even about this issue that bothers you so much, that he's so rich and lots of people aren't. But no, you don't want to even deal with him. That's what I hate about the left. You're brats. You're brats and you're snobs and people don't like.
But this wasn't just some vague critique. He aimed directly at the show's refusal to tolerate different political views, especially anything leaning conservative.
Israel 5 times. They've started 5 wars since they were given that land back. They could have chosen to turn that place into any place they wanted to, and they took a lot of money that they took from the international community and they spent it on bombs and guns and building tunnels. So if they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? It's a war. I don't know how to do that, and you don't know how to do that. I assume the Israeli Of course, everybody is, but that's what happens in a war. Here's a way to stop that. Stop attacking Israel.
According to him, The View isn't about sharing ideas. It's about reinforcing the same ones over and over. And that point hit hard. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now, let's continue.
Ira Glasser, former longtime head of the ACLU, talking about free speech. Whoopi Goldberg, who, by the way, I hope is still a friend, we can disagree with each other, should not be canceled or put off her show, as much as I totally disagree with her crazy statement. Free speech. She should be there. She shouldn't get a timeout.
Not every single thing has to be for everybody.
Right.
We can have platforms that have stuff on them that not everyone on that platform or who consumes stuff on that platform enjoys. And The View is a particularly weird place to do a cancellation.
It's called called The View?
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but
It's
isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
Well,
that's the problem in America.
There
is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the corner.
Because in the next part, things only got more uncomfortable for The View. After calling out the show's fake diversity of thought, he didn't back down. In fact, he pushed even harder. He looked straight into the camera, then out at the audience, and delivered a line that left the entire room in silence. Losers need to look in the mirror. That wasn't just some vague insult. It was a direct shot at liberal media figures who, according to him, couldn't accept the results of elections they didn't like.
Have a very different opinion. And the answer is not to make them sit in a corner for 2 weeks. That is insulting. It's so insulting to make a 65-year-old, I mean, the person at ABC News said, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. Reflect. How insulting for someone of her age, who's a sophisticated person, and the impact of her comment. There is no impact. There aren't neo-Nazis waiting for the green light from a lady on The View to go out and do a new crystal knot.
So right. And the whole point of free speech is we don't need free speech when we're right, when everyone agrees with us. We need free speech when we're wrong. We need free speech to make mistakes. We need free speech to say really unpopular things. And one of the reasons I'm always proud to come on this show, and I suspect you feel the same way, Catherine, is this is the only space left on television where people can speak freely and not be terrified, right?
Yes.
And you have...
He brought up the confusion and outrage people expressed when Trump began surging in popularity again. The hosts of The View, like so many others, couldn't understand how it was even possible. But instead of pausing for self-reflection, asking what they might have missed, they just kept pointing fingers. And that's exactly what he was calling out. Then came the real jab. He compared their denial to a failure to recognize reality, saying they never expected Trump to have a second chance because they were trapped in their own echo chamber.
The whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me just ask, what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can. There's a lot
Hold on. Calm down.
He said America rarely turns down a sequel, whether it's movies or presidents, and the moment those words hit, the hosts froze. They weren't ready for someone unafraid to say what half the country was thinking. And they definitely weren't ready to hear that these so-called winners might actually be the ones refusing to face the truth. Things got even more tense when The View tried to corner him with immigration. They asked how Trump could ever deport millions, expecting him to stumble. Instead, he fired back with razor-sharp sarcasm. Trump's already ahead of you? Why do you think he left so many holes in the wall? The audience erupted, while the host sat in stunned silence, but he didn't stop there. Turning his aim on the wider media, late-night hosts, celebrities, and commentators, he called out their performative outrage. Loud declarations, moral superiority, and zero accountability. He wasn't playing their game, and they had no idea how to respond. Then he shifted to Saturday Night Live. He asked the support expression, yes, but only if you're saying the right things. That was his point. He even brought up the backlash when Elon Musk hosted SNL. Not because Elon was conservative, but simply because he was rich. Cast members openly protested, refused to engage, some barely even showed up. He called it out for what it was, childish, smug, and a missed opportunity to have a real conversation with someone influential. Then he dropped the hammer. You're brats, you're snobs, and people are sick of it. The silence after that said everything, but then came the moment that truly rattled The View. They opened the door by bringing up Middle East conflicts, expecting a safe, controlled conversation. Instead, what they got left the co-host silent and visibly uncomfortable. He didn't tiptoe around the topic, he went straight in. He said Israel had the right to defend itself, and he pointed out how much international aid had been misused. Not for building schools or futures, but for bombs, guns, and tunnels. The panel wasn't prepared for that kind of bluntness. One host tried to challenge him, but he shut it down instantly. If they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? You don't know. I don't know. That's war. But here's how you stop it. Stop attacking. The crowd clapped, but the table stayed dead quiet. And that silence wasn't just awkward, it was revealing. For a show that thrives on arguments, none of them had anything to say. No counterpoint. No clever comeback. Because he wasn't just throwing out opinions, he was exposing how shallow their arguments really were. He wasn't demanding people pick sides. He was demanding honesty. And when honesty walked into the room went cold. By this point, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But even then, he wasn't finished. He turned to one of the most controversial moments in The View's history, when one of their own was suspended over a statement the network didn't like. And he didn't dodge it. He said her comment was crazy, sure. But then he added something that shocked everyone. She shouldn't be canceled. She shouldn't be taken off the air. And that's when the room shifted again. Because now he was defending someone he completely disagreed with. Not because he liked what she said, but because he believed in free speech. That kind of move is rare, especially on a show that's become a symbol of cancel culture itself. He mocked the network's decision, dripping with sarcasm. What impact? There aren't neo-Nazis waiting for the green light from the lady on The View. He wasn't defending the words, he was defending the right to speak without being punished like a school kid. And in that moment, The View looked like exactly what it claimed not to be, a place where one wrong sentence means you're out. His message was simple. Free speech isn't just for opinions we like. It's for the ones we don't. From there, he zoomed out, striking at something bigger. The illusion of freedom in today's media. He said, "We don't need free speech when we're right. We need it when we're wrong." That line settled into the room like a gut punch. Real freedom, he explained, means being allowed to make mistakes, say unpopular things, and still be heard. He even praised the show he was on, not The View, as one of the few places left on television where you could speak your mind without fear. And then he asked the ultimate question. Have you ever seen anything like that happen on The View? The answer didn't need to be spoken. Everyone watching already knew, because on The View, disagreement isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Step out of line and you're gone. Say something unpopular and you're shamed into silence. And that's exactly what he exposed. Not just criticism, but cold, unfiltered exposure of how things really work behind the polished set. He dug deeper, right into the heart of the show's favorite narrative, especially around the 2020 election. For years, the panel repeated the same line. Trump's support came from racism and misogyny. But he broke that wall with one simple truth. People just wanted a better life. They weren't drawn to Trump because they hated women or minorities. Many were struggling financially, emotionally, socially. They wanted stability, safety, and the ability to provide for their families. And when Trump spoke to those needs, even in a messy way, people listened. That hit hard, especially when he pointed out that even the poorest demographics, the ones the media assumes will always vote left, showed more support for Trump than expected. Not all, but enough to make a difference. He called out the arrogance of assuming anyone without a college degree who votes conservative must be ignorant or hateful. Stats are stats, he said, but a stat doesn't say I voted for Trump because I'm racist. That kind of arrogance, he warned, is exactly why so many feel unheard and disrespected. And just like that, The View's carefully crafted story about why people vote the way they do came crashing down. But before the moment passed, he delivered one more blow. A dangerous question. What happens to people who just want to ask questions? What if someone doesn't agree with the official story? Not out of hate, not out of extremism, but simply because their experience is different. That's when the silence on The View became deafening. He described how this refusal to hear opposing thoughts has seeped into every layer of left-leaning media. He called it the one true opinion mentality, where everything outside the approved script gets shoved aside. Then he brought it back to the show's name. It's called The View, not the facts, he said with a smirk. You could feel the air leave the room. And he wasn't wrong. When Barbara Walters created The View, the goal was to bring different women from different walks of life together to talk openly. But now, it's one perspective, repeated endlessly. Step outside the lines, and you're treated like a virus. He gave real examples. Hosts being sidelined, guests shouted down, segments cut short when things got uncomfortable. Above all, the suffocating pressure to agree. To perform agreement, even when it feels fake. And then he asked the question nobody on that set wanted to hear. What does that do to the audience? Millions tune in expecting honest conversation, maybe even a clash of ideas, but instead, they get the same conclusions, wrapped in different faces. And when someone dares to challenge it, laughter, eye rolls, or worse, silence, like what happened when he spoke about Israel, free speech, and voters without degrees. Nobody even tried to argue. They just shut down. And that silence, that wasn't strength. That was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of what might happen if people started thinking for themselves. Having a different opinion shouldn't make you an enemy, he said plainly. And whether you agreed with him or not, you couldn't deny it. He had ripped the curtain wide open. The View wasn't just exposed that day, it was undressed. The smiles, the slogans, the applause, they couldn't hide the truth anymore. And the truth was sitting right there at the table, refusing to be quiet. And then came the final crack in the show's carefully managed image. A panelist tried to push back, tried to redirect, but chaos broke out. Tensions flared, voices rose, and the show fell back into its pattern. Shut down disagreement, smooth it over, pretend it never happened. But this time, the disruption was the point. He called it out for exactly what it was. Proof that even one opposing thought sends the show into panic mode. One idea that doesn't fit, and suddenly the energy shifts, the room goes cold, the producers scramble. But it was already too late. The message had landed. On shows like The View, dissent isn't debated, it's erased. If you say people don't always vote based on hate, they don't listen, they tense up. The conversation doesn't deepen, it dies, and that's the real danger. Not disagreement itself, but the fact that disagreement has become a threat. And until that changes, he warned, the people these shows claim to speak for will keep tuning out. Because when the only view allowed is The View, the truth doesn't just get ignored, it gets buried. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.